We can be courageous enough to meet these moments of transition with presence, to let ourselves be transformed in relationship to that which is dying and being reborn within and around us, to trust in the wild unfolding, to find the beauty in being here. Hello and welcome. Many of you know that my father left his body last week. This is the most profound initiation I have ever experienced, and the timing in relationship to the collective picture is quite extraordinary. It was always a desire of mine to interview my dad on this podcast. There are many conversations we've had, one in particular last summer, which I wished I had recorded as they were perfect for this show. Somehow it never happened, and in the 10 days since he left, I've actually looked everywhere to find anything that has his voice on it. I haven't found anything of him talking directly to me or sharing his wisdom. For me, my main language is energy, and that conversation is still very much going. And then, of course, it's the voice. That's why I do this show. And so there's been this process this week of letting go, of needing to have that captured, of needing to listen to that again, listen to him again. And instead, allow and trust that everything that he needed to show me or say to me is now of me, is part of me, and that I don't need to listen back. Last weekend was a special full moon we celebrate called Guru Purnima, where we honor our teachers, both the teacher within and the ones in our lives. We have so many teachers in this life, human and more than human, and some are so karmic and impact us so deeply. I love that my father, who was born on a full moon and whose name means moon, and Guru Purnima have become so intertwined in this way here in 2020. I had a few workshops last weekend that had been long planned, which I decided to show up for even and especially in these circumstances. One of these was a workshop called The Art of Deep Listening, which included a mini pilgrimage to go out and listen to Earth. In the second part of this podcast, I share with you a 40-minute meditation that I shared in this workshop, which is really opening the gates of listening to oneself, as we can only listen to others, the depth that we can listen to ourselves. This is a beautiful practice that you can do in a quiet moment, and it's my gift to you. In the first part of this episode, I share a tribute to my father, and it speaks to karma and cycles of death and rebirth. Thank you to each one of you for being here and sharing in this exploration of life in the very bigness of the word here with me. I'm truly grateful to share this space of the future is beautiful with you all. And for the ways that you've shown up for me in these past 10 days. I've received kindness, support, and gifts. Thank you as always to our patrons and to members of Presence. This month, our theme is integration, which we take every 3 months as that space for embodiment and letting everything settle is so important for real transformation. Today, I was singing with my 4-year-old niece, E94. We love to make up songs together, and she sang the words, "Gather your beauty and put it under children's pillows." This vision of our beauty feeding the future generations as they sleep made my heart sing. I hope that this episode, the tribute and the meditation, open up something for you so we may all live and co-create in beauty. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, We create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. This love is unbound. These are the words that have been so present as my father was in the transition and in the days after he left his body. It's really a remarkable thing to witness death, something that has been part of my life more than once. To feel that moment where the energy that holds the stories of a life disappears, and you only feel the beauty of the soul with its unique essence, and at the same time, the eternal, expansive nature of it. I feel humbled in a new way to have been with my dad for the last 3 weeks of his life, and especially those final days. It was a full-on time for me of late with the podcast series starting up again, the listening to each other, listening to Earth collaboration, and my book on intuition going to print in less than 2 weeks. I was in a time where I was working long hours, in a way trying to clear my deck so I could spend some time with my father. And then it happened this way, where I had to find the space to be with him on this timing. I've never been scared of being around death, and I'm feeling into becoming a death doula in an official way. I have supported many through grief, and just like birth, there is something so special about having people around at these times that can honor and hold space for these transitions. People that aren't afraid of this change in form. People that aren't afraid of the pain and the loss. Both Hindus and Jains believe that the time of death is predetermined in this life. And as somebody who has studied death a lot, I do believe that we know on some levels when it is near. My father was a Jain, although he married a Hindu. This was part of his revolutionary nature, to have a cross-religious love marriage at a time when everyone around him had arranged marriages. His spirituality was very central to him, not always in a way of ritual and practice, but in a way that was the roots of his making sense of the world. We've talked about death more than most fathers and daughters ever have. That's one of the things that I'm grateful for, that has contributed deeply to who I am. No conversation was ever off the table. We were allowed to be real and complex. He also gave me freedom to be a Jain, to be a Hindu, to go to a Christian school, to find my own way to make sense of the world that I was in. This led to me realizing very early on that each of these religions were beautiful in their own way, but there was an essence that I felt when I was part of all of them, and that I also felt just being with myself, being with people I loved, being in nature, that seemed to carry what it is that I was tasting in the temples and in the church. The actual process of being with my father as he died was a beautiful spiritual experience, one that I feel it's not right to share the details of here, but a moment where I experienced grace and the transmissions of his life's understanding in a way that was energetic, without words, yet it reshaped and reformed my inner being. It has, of course, had me thinking so much about death and how we handle death in many Western societies. The English way of death has never made sense to me. Grieving is a natural part of life and a collective experience. And here we are in this pandemic where we can't all gather and be together. I feel that is what we're learning as we face all that 2020 is revealing to us. Much of what has been part of our story for a very long time, and yet the reality of it is rising to the surface. I believe we're in a constant cycle of death and rebirth. It's part of the process of transformation, that in ourselves, part of us die and are reborn different. If you believe in reincarnation, as I always have, then this life is part of a bigger story. And this opens up a different perspective of what it means to leave this body. Another thing my father and I talked about a lot was karma. And I've been contemplating this recently in regards to white supremacy, feeling into these notions of success that are so rampant in this culture, the values of fame and fortune, And yet within these systems of oppression, how possible is it to live that way without feeding off others' suffering? We have a way of viewing those who have the most visibility and riches as successful. And yet what if it's the opposite to that, or at least somewhere in the grey areas? People I love come to mind with beautiful souls and so much spirit, who don't get anywhere close to their potential in that way in this life. Maybe they have chronic illnesses, or through racism have had many doors slammed in their faces. Maybe they've been caring for others or doing other aspects of the quiet work. I do also believe in flow consciousness and our ability to heal and create, and at the same time have observed in myself and others periods of life where the transformation is so messy and inner, private in a way that the world would never recognize. We don't know what the essence of each other's lives is really about. I think about the lives of those that were slaves or those that live in slavery now, and what a successful life means in that context. I think about the will to be alive that has brought each one of us here, that our ancestors have all survived so much and somehow kept reproducing, and here we are, alive, and many of us healthy, standing here in the realm of possibility. As my father left his body, it became so clear to me how similar we were in our missions and how much he taught me. It's not that I didn't know that when he was alive, I did. But in the moment of his liberation, this space opened up. Veils were lifted and everything was crystal clear. Like the filters of ego and story which had been taking up so much space disappeared, and all that remained was what was true and what was here to serve the future. We have such stories about our parents and often see them only in relationship to us. I've been enjoying seeing him as a man in his own right, as well as a soul. One who, being my father, was just one of the roles and experiences he played in a tapestry of karma that was much bigger than that. Even though he had a way of making me feel that his role as my dad was the most important one he had. My father, Dr. Himanshu Gadiyali, was a beautiful and intense man. Fearless and resilient, adventurous, courageous, wise and deep. A true visionary healer, living in a world that wasn't quite ready for all that he had to offer, which broke my heart at times. When I scan all the things he did in his life that I know about, it blows my mind. He forged his own revolutionary path. He was the first 6-foot-tall brown man to go to many places where no other Indian man had gone before. He had such strong intuition and could offer support to many through his Jainism, Jungian analysis, and psychiatric training, through the beauty of his soul and the brightness of his mind, not to mention his amazing cooking and generosity. He didn't have the easiest pathway through life. From the age of 4 or 5, he was acutely aware of the pain and suffering, and it was through Jainism he was able to find a way of understanding. As a child, he became interested in moksha, the freedom from samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, the freedom from ignorance through self-realization, self-actualization, and self-knowledge. I imagine he was a sensitive and intense child in Bombay. I imagine he was deeply loving. I imagine he didn't find it easy to connect with everyone around him. I love seeing the photos of my parents in the 70s, going on all these adventures, exploring the inner and outer worlds. My father was in many ways a philosopher, a quiet thinking man that was always looking and making sense of the world around him and the world inside of him. As a child, my father's Jungian analysis practice, which he did from my home, is one of my most powerful memories. Each Saturday, we had patients come to the house. I loved to be the one to open the door and make them tea. I used to sing songs for some as they were waiting. For others, I would pass the box of tissues. We had a joke that many of them came back each week to see me. As a child, my father taught me that people that looked normal had problems, that this was part of life. He taught me how to read people, to see deeper than what was presented to me. He taught me not to judge people's pain and suffering, or even their madness. He took me to many places as a child. We traveled a lot to stay connected to relatives in India and America, and also to see the world. There was so much adventure and a freedom to be who I was and not be limited by tradition or old stories. I remember him taking me to the pyramids, the Wailing Wall, to many temples. I remember going to many cathedrals and castles around England. Of course, my teenage years weren't so smooth. but I can understand why they played out the way they did when I look back from this perspective. I always say that the ability to be present to the light and beauty in this world is in direct relationship to the ability to be present with the pain and the darkness. It's that spectrum that really connects us to this life. There is so much spiritual bypassing and disassociation in our culture. It's an art and a practice to be willing to feel, to be willing to sit in the mess. My father showed me the spectrum and taught me not to fear it. What else would a committed Jungian teach? It was actually psychoanalysis that brought me to the UK. After my father got married and was a psychiatrist in India, he felt he wanted to study the mind deeper and had an intuition to come to the UK and study Freud. It turned out that he got on with Jung much better. And although the plan had always been to go back to India after he finished his analysis, that didn't happen. And I grew up not even knowing that that could have been a possibility. He always encouraged me to be present to where I was. That was the rolling hills of Derbyshire in my childhood, where we lived as the only brown family for miles. He made that seem so normal and like we were meant to be there. I look back and think what courage he had to make those kind of choices for us. And so many of the choices he made, despite receiving near daily racism and constant institutional racism, he would get projected onto, falsely accused of causing harm and interrogated. He would stand tall and with dignity throughout, often with a sense of humour, and sometimes with a seriousness. I admire the courage to go to another country with just a small suitcase in the days where you couldn't make a phone call back to the people that you know. So much is said about immigrants, especially in this country. I wonder if all those people that have shouted at me in the streets to go home, or people at events that have asked me in that certain tone where I'm from, could even comprehend the guts it takes to move to another part of the world, not in a colonial or neo-colonial way, to raise your children in a different culture. It's interesting to reflect on my father's life at this exact moment where anti-racism is suddenly a term that everyone knows, as the best-selling books are on racism and white supremacy, at a time where there's a willingness to see our world from a different perspective. One thing I know about the life that I was born into is that I've had to learn to listen deeply, to read between the lines. I've learned to be brave. When I was being bullied by friends at school, my father would always tell me to be like the elephant and walk through the jungle. He always had the courage to put his ideas forward, to try something new. He had a commitment to what worked rather than what had always been done, or what was easiest, or what would ruffle the least feathers. Many of his patients had been to so many doctors before finally finding peace and healing with them. He always believed that each one of us had the keys to heal ourselves, and that we just needed to be shown the door. Even as he was having so many health issues, he was supporting so many members of my family. I've been speaking to relatives in India and America who tell me they've been having many one-to-one chats with my dad about their problems, and that he could always offer them a fresh perspective and show them a way to change their story. He did that for me also. Of course, at times it was really annoying, but I see how much care was present and how not many parents would go that deep. It's made me who I am. There is so much I could say about my dad, and I'm sure many stories will come out in future conversations, as moments like this change something in us forever if we let them, if we're able to welcome in the transformation. I know there will be many times in my life where I wish I could ask him something or that he could be here. And at the same time, I know that I've already learned everything from him I need to know, and that the energetics of the teachings live on and continue to transform inside of me and inside of each person that loved him. It feels very special that during this time I've been writing a book on intuition, and that as I'm here in the final editing stage, I can dedicate it to my father, a man who made all his decisions through his intuition and taught me to live from mine in a way that is intelligent and grounded. The book comes out in December. It feels like the time since I signed the contract in January has been the most epic initiation. And through this time, the words I've written have been reprogramming my cells, and that so much has happened in both my world and the world during this time. It's possible to miss somebody and be so happy for their liberation, to live in deep respect of the cycles and death and rebirth of our souls. I've been reminded this at this time, that grief doesn't follow the same path for everyone, that we all find our own way through, and there is much beauty in being able to accept and let go. One of the main principles of Jainism is aparigraha, non-possessiveness, and this includes that of people. It's the living mantra of if you love something, let it go, or if you love somebody, let them go. I believe the principles of Jainism have a lot to offer us in these times, and that this is the subject of another conversation. After the break, I share with you a meditation that is a practice of connection to yourself, and the mantra is a Hindu one in Sanskrit. My father's teacher when he was young, Kiranbai, said to him, "Know yourself and you will understand the universe." And I believe that our practice supports this, that we can venture deeper into the understanding of the self, so we might be able to discern what is truth in these wild times. Hello, we're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation. So I'd like to invite us into a space of meditation and into a space of accessing that essence of who we are. And so all of this is just an invitation. If you don't feel to close your eyes or to do anything, just be as you feel, really. But if it feels good for you, then you can close your eyes now and you can sit up nice and tall. And we're going to take Bhumi Sparsha Mudra. And if you're on a chair, it's a little bit harder, but you can imagine. You're going to bring your left hand to your heart, connecting deeply to your essence, and then your right fingertips onto the earth next to you. And if you don't have earth next to you, maybe you can put them onto a table or even onto your knee, but with that understanding that you're touching, it's the light touch of the earth. And I invite an Om as we connect through sacred sound. Om. And if your hands feel comfortable where they are, you can keep them there. If you prefer, you can bring both hands down to your knees, palms facing down. If you feel more like you want to bring your energy into your body, and palms facing up if you feel more like you want to connect to and bring in new energy into your body. And taking some nice deep breaths here. With each exhale, just letting go of where you find yourself right now, of your morning, of your story. And if it helps you, you can take a nice, big, noisy, audible sigh like this. Ah. And with each breath, allowing yourself to come into deeper presence. And invite your ancestors behind you. And maybe it's some of the ones that you know, your parents, your grandparents, but allowing all your ancestors, those that you've never met, to come and stand behind you. Remembering that you have survived through worlds that have been far more violent than the one that we find ourselves in now. And somehow that spark of survival and resilience in your ancestors has led to you being here. And that their light, their truth, their suffering, their deep wishes are all alive to support you. You're your ancestors' wildest dreams. And in front of you, bring that space of your future generations. Perhaps it's your own children, your own grandchildren. Perhaps it's children that have not yet been born. Perhaps it's nieces and nephews. Perhaps it's just children of this world that you feel a soul connection to. Maybe it's the plants that you tend to, the roses in your garden, the plants in your house. So just bringing this placing that you exist with both lineage behind you and lineage in front of you. And bring the presence of the earth underneath you, of the land, of the soil through which so much grows, as this place of home, this place of belonging. And bring the whole cosmos above you. Just feel that presence of Earth's skies, of our moon, our sun, our stars, but really the greater cosmos of which we're part of, the greater consciousness. So you feel this consciousness existing from underneath, from above, from behind, from in front. And around your sides, your left and your right, you can bring any people, places, spirit guides that are meaningful to you, that really support you in being the great soul that you are. And bring your awareness and breath to your heart. This space of your soul, and space of your intuition, this space of connection. You can feel the expanse of this space out through every cell of your body and out through your whole field. That this part of your essence is huge. And if you can, keeping your awareness in your heart space, can you also bring the awareness of your third eye and crown and that connection to the cosmos, and the awareness of your root and your solar plexus and that connection to earth into your awareness right now? Inviting this practice of deep listening to this part of yourself. What is this part of yourself like? What is the essence of you, of yourself? You can sit with this question, and for some of you, it might come through in pictures or in energy. For others, you might hear words. If you want to write the answer, kind of staying in this meditative space, you can pick up a notebook and let the words come out that way. Or you can know that there don't need to be words, but that the subtle aspects of you know. And the more that you give this part of yourself attention, the more permission this part of yourself has to be in this world. And the next contemplation here is, what does this part of you want you to know right now? And at this time of reckoning, of planetary, collective, personal initiation, where we're all required to be sacred activists, what is your way, your role, your dharma, your mission, your purpose? What is your way of being in this now? in a way that really honors your lineage, your ancestors, the body that you've been born into, the name, the story, the experiences that you've had. How has that placed you to serve at this time? And as we listen deeply to all this information, invite it to live in every cell of your being. The true art of listening is not to hear, it's to become. The more deeply we listen, the more tuned in we are with that is real, that is sacred. And we live at a time where there is so much information and so many narratives and agendas and this sort of extraction as a way of life. We live in a world that's been built on extraction. But what is it to not need to mine the information, but allow the information to be alive, like the true information? So we listen for that aliveness of what's real. And the more that we activate that in ourselves, the stronger our intuition becomes, and the stronger our discernment becomes. And intuition and discernment are the skills of this time. I'd like to share a mantra with you. And this is a Sanskrit mantra. And it really connects us to the fullness of our true nature. It's a celebration of that ever-present bliss. And for me, it's important to be connected to that. So the word in Sanskrit is ananda, and it's that bliss that is unconditional. So even though there's a pandemic, even though you might find yourself in a hurricane, even though you might be feeling grief and loss, even though you might be terrified of what the future of humanity is, or deeply hurt at how humans are treating Earth, that within that, you don't have to live in crisis. You can live in the fullness of you, and that there is that bliss that is part of all of it. And that doesn't lead to inaction. It doesn't mean that then you just kind of bliss bubble out and you're like, oh yeah, everything's awesome. I'll just like hang back and watch, like detach from the difficulty of this time. But it's actually the opposite. It's like you tap so deeply into your essence, Ananda, into that bliss, that you are able to hold the sacred in the difficulty. And because if you are connected to the bliss in the difficulty, if you are connected to the sacredness of this experience of life and this experience of being present, from there, what you contribute is going to be more of what we need. And so the translation of this mantra is totally full with the bliss of conduct that is aligned with my true nature. My real nature is divine. My essence is eternal joy. My real nature is always connected with what is. And the kind of chorus part, if you like, Shivoham, so I am Shiva, the ever presence. Anandoham, so I am that unconditional bliss. And so those of you that know it, I know a few of you do, that are members of Presence, feel free to join in. And those of you that don't, if you can get the Shivoham, Anandoham part, then join in with that. And just that our intention in this mantra is that we are assisting the process of allowing all of that to which we have just listened of our true nature to come into form in ourselves, in our being, in this world. And some of you might want to bring your hands into Anjali Mudra, into prayer. Some of you might want to bring them back into Bhumi Sparsha, the light touch of the earth mudra. And some of you might want to keep them where they are. Satyayananda Parapurnam Shivoham Shivoham Nityayananda Swarupam Shivoham Shivoham Anandoham 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 Satyayananda Parapurnam Shivoham Shivoham Nityayananda Swarupam Shivoham Shivoham Anandoham 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 Satyayananda Parapurnam Shivoham Shivoham Nityayananda Swarupam Shivoham Shivoham Anandoham 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 Satyayananda Parapurnam Shivoham Shivoham Nityayananda Swarupam Shivoham Shivoham Anandoham 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 Anandoham. And now just this beautiful releasing and gratitude of all of those energies that we called into our space, our ancestors, our future generations, the earth, the cosmos, the people, places, guides. A deep thank you for this sacred time together, that how when we step into this space together, that we invite a deeper field for each other, and that ripples out to those in our lives, to the collective, to the earth, to that which is beyond human and earth. We can chant an Om together to close this space. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question: how will you create beauty in the world?